Okay, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to our session, which is UCU BMSC Black Members Standing Committee webinar on fighting job cuts and structural racism. Really looking forward to having a lengthy and engaging discussion on those particular areas. We have got a fantastic lineup of people, and I'm really pleased that so many people have signed up to be part of this. My name's Dr. Victoria Shirunmi, and I'm currently the chair of the Black Members Standing Committee, and I'm also interim for Higher Education Committee as well. I also am chair of the Equalities Committee for UCU. So let's get started. I want to start, first of all, give a few rules, which is that we've got 5 people which are on the panel, and I'm going to introduce them. Each of them have got questions. Those questions they've identified, and those questions, they will run through those questions, and they will have a timed amount to answer those questions. If there's time at the end, I may also provide another question, but it depends on the timing. They will open up the discussion with a 5 minutes introduction on what they're actually wanting to say from the part of the sector and how they're going to present themselves. Then they'll go on to their questions, and then we will come back at the end to allow them to sum up with a minute. Hopefully that is clear. In the background, we have our signer who will sign for people which require signing. And we also have our colleague, Christopher Nicholas, who is the coordinator for the BMSE, who's done all the work. And I want to give him a big thanks for that. I'm now going to move on to our candidates. We have Maxine Libby, who she says she's been an activist in trade union movement for a number of years. She's currently the UCU NEC and BMSC member and branch secretary at Greater Manchester FE College, carrying out casework, negotiating and bargaining work on behalf of members. She's determined to push the FE calls up the agenda and develop strategies to bring on board the young activists so they develop and become future leaders and bring the voice of Black members to the fore. I would like to, no further ado, I'd like to now bring Maxine to the stand so she can answer her questions, and she has 5 minutes to introduce herself first and then go into the questions. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Victoria. Good evening. My name is Maxine Libby, as Victoria said. Good to see so many of you here joining this webinar, which is a strong indication that there are issues out there that we need to discuss. None more so than the issues around COVID-19, risk assessments, and also the impact COVID is having on staff, particularly staff who are on casualised contracts. We're already beginning to see the impact that's having with individuals in concerns about possible redundancies and restructures. So I'm hoping this particular webinar will provide you with some information that gives you the confidence to address some of those issues. Now, some of those issues may well be around COVID, and some of the issues may well be around job security, both in higher education and further education, because it's becoming an issue in both of those sectors. As you may be aware, those who work in FE, most of us are now back, if not on site, back virtually working within the FE setting. And I understand that HE will be back very soon, in September, I do believe. Now, as we know, there are a number of issues, and one of them I would strongly suggest, particularly for workers who may be vulnerable, is anxiety of going back on site and what that entails and what their rights are. So I will be taking some questions and answering some questions that have been previously submitted about what you can do as individuals with concerns around returning to work, what you can do collectively as members in your own branch, and what your responsibility is as an individual, and what the employer's responsibility is to you. Now, those two things are very important, and it's very important that we have some kind of clear guidance as to what you can say and do when you return to work. Now, UCU has just issued some guidance to support members in the workplace who have some concerns or not too sure where to go with that information, or what advice to take. That is just actually flashed up on the screen. So there's a link there that gives some really consistent and precise advice about what Black members can do in challenging issues around COVID risk assessments and also on-site working. So that will be distributed to all members at some point this week, but it's very important, very comprehensive guide, and hopefully it will answer most of your questions, if not all of your questions. If not, please feel free to get in contact with us. We are the Black Members Standing Committee. We are here for all Black members, and I mean all Black members, regardless of status, HE, FE, prison or adult education. And our role is to try and support members collectively and individually to challenge some of the structural racism that most of us or all of us have experienced at some time throughout our careers in higher education and further education. If you'd like to get more involved in activities that we support as initiatives, again, that link has come up on screen, and it'd be really good to see more Black members raising up and getting involved, particularly the young members who we as a committee are committed to developing as activists in the future. Okay, so I believe now I've got some questions that were previously submitted. Can I just check if that's the case, Chris? And if I need to go into those questions? Just bear with me. So I think I've got 3 questions here that were around issues of Black Lives Matters and COVID related issues. Okay, so the first question we have here is regarding how do we protect staff who are Black regarding COVID-19 risk assessments as individuals. Now, as I said before, there has been a document released today which provides some really insightful information. It breaks down what you can do and what you can't do, what the employer's responsibility is in terms of what do they need to do to ensure that you're protected as an individual as well as a member of staff within that institution. How we protect staff regarding COVID-19 is by 2 things. One's really important: ensuring that you make contact with the health and safety reps either at your branch or within your region. That information is available either through your reps or either your regional office. Now, they have some very competent representatives who can support you through this. But please bear in mind, I'm getting some feedback that people are being told that they are not entitled to an individual risk assessment. Everybody has the entitlement to an individual risk assessment. Everybody, regardless. And that doesn't just mean if you've got an underlying condition or a disability. If for any reason you feel that you need an individual risk assessment, you have the right to request that from your employer. So the guide actually gives some details about how that happens and what you need to do to ensure that happens. That individual risk assessment should then inform what actions and what mitigation your employer needs to take to ensure your safety. And again, it's not just about whether you have underlying conditions. If you have anxieties about going back into the workplace, this is something that also needs to be raised as part of that risk assessment. So I'll reiterate, because it's really important and a lot of people are concerned about that. It is everybody's right to request an individual risk assessment from their employer. If you need any more information about the best way to go about that, or you've got any concerns about how to do that, then as we said, we can support you with that. But I would advise anybody who's feeling anxious, nervous, any of the protective characteristics underlying health conditions, any of those, I would from the offset get that risk assessment completed, because if there's an issue later on and you don't have a risk assessment in place, it's more difficult to then tackle that. So it's important that you get that in place. Okay. The next question is, I just think that's going to come up on the screen. So, how will UCU ensure that Black academics are not forced to return to classroom teaching without there being thorough measures put in place alongside strict enforcement? Again, this goes back to two things. Your employer should have generic risk assessments in place that detail how returning to on-site work looks. So if you haven't seen them, you need to request those from your employer. They should actually be made available to all staff in a place that's visible. So if you haven't seen those generic risk assessments, please ask your employer either through HR or your health and safety team to provide those for you. Everybody should have access to those. In terms of being forced to return to the classroom, which I know is an issue, particularly for people on casual contracts who feel maybe sometimes they may be pushed into returning to work because they are on casual contracts and they're concerned about their employment. Again, whether you're on a part-time, casual, temporary contact, maternity cover, you have the right to a risk assessment. So to ensure that you're not forced back into the classroom in an environment that's not safe or that you don't feel safe in, but the first port of call is that risk assessment. And I know that can be difficult, particularly when you're, you're off colour or you're Black, or you are on a casual contract, because of the fears that go alongside putting your head above the parapet sometimes. But please be assured that in terms of health and safety legislation, that is your right to request that as standard, every employer. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. Next question. What do you do when sickness is being used against you? And when that sickness, sorry, I just missed that. And when that sickness, I think the question just come off the screen. And when that sickness is due to COVID. Okay. First things first, if you have any sickness related illnesses or COVID itself, you will still go through the standard return to work procedure. Nobody should be at detriment for having COVID. Nobody. And UCU is very clear on that. If you've contracted COVID or you've had to isolate due to COVID, there should be no detriment to your working conditions or your pay or anything else that's in line. So if you have been sick, again, the first thing to do is go through the channels, which will be through your line manager and HR. They should, as standard, do a return to work, regardless of whether it's COVID or any other related illness, as standard. If you then disclose that you are being off sick because you have been isolating or you've had COVID, again, that should not be at a detriment to you. Your pay should remain the same. Your sickness rights should remain the same also. So if for any reason you feel that it is being used against you, I would say the first thing you need to do is contact your rep, explain the situation to them, and they can look into that for you and give you the most appropriate advice at that time. Okay. Next question. Okay, how can the union support the Black Lives Matter movement so that people can become more aware and understand what inequality looks like for those Black, Asian, minority ethnic members that we have out there? I think we're all quite clear about how racism rears its ugly head and the forms that takes, whether it's covert, overt, micro. I think we've all had experiences of how that looks. In terms of the Black Lives Matters, what I would suggest first of all is to possibly get some guidance from the Black Members Standing Committee. We have a wealth of resources and guidance and ideas about how you can support the movement and also develop it either in your region or at a branch level. So I think Chris will be later on be providing some information about how you can access that information. It's also very good to get in touch with other establishments within your region. Maybe I'd suggest that if there's 2 or 3 FE and HE establishments within the same region as you, maybe asking your regional office to get in touch with them on your behalf, so that you could possibly meet up together, so that you can understand what are some of the issues that are probably what I would say is probably typical to your particular area, or some of the more generic issues that we face around racism. This is a time that we need to start taking action where this is concerned. This is a time that we need to start pushing that agenda, and we're not asking anybody to do that individually. It's really important that we do these things collectively, because that's where the power is, and that's where the strength is, within the numbers that we have and with people who are coming together to support the cause. So from that point of view, I would say get in touch with Black Members Standing Committee. We will send some information out to you also. We've got a host of advice and resources that are available to you, and we can advise you on the next steps with that. Hope that answers all your questions. I believe I'm being cued to come off now, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you very much for turning up today, and hope to see more of you sometime soon, and hopefully we can move forward together. Thank you.
Hi, Victoria. Just to let you know, I think you're on mute at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Maxine. Really appreciate that. I'd like to now introduce our next candidate who is going to speak, which is Juliana Ojianka. Now, Juliana is a member of based at Sheffield College, who is active in a regional network in Yorkshire and Humberside, and a member of the Black Members Standing Committee. She's done a large amount of work. She is known for her work across different things, and she also is she's quite humble not to mention that she's also part of the Women's Standing Committee as well. Juliana, I'm going to hand over to you. You have an amount of time, which is maximum 5 minutes, to introduce what you want to briefly introduce your work and what you feel kind of passionate about, and then on top of that, you'll go straight into your question. Juliana.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for being part of this webinar. I think that my area is advancing equality in FE, and looking at how Black workers can progress equality within their institution, especially in FE. We've had all the reports, we've had all the reviews, we've had all the research, we've had all the policies, we've had all the laws, we've had all of the motions within UCU, within UCU, and no, I don't think so. I thought there's a bit of a noise problem. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Oh dear.
Can hear you, but so sorry. I think maybe your mic, is there issues with your mic? Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so as I was saying before, we've had all the reports, we've had all the evidence and so on, and as most people have said in the past, FE is the poor relation of higher education, and if FE is the poor relation of higher education, the Black workers are the poorest in that whole setup. Okay, so especially within the UCU, so FE is really trailing behind in terms of actions and representations and so on for Black workers. So so we've had all reports, and UCU has done witness reports, various reports on race pay gap, lack of promotion of Black staff, overrepresentation of Black lecturers
Okay,
on the precarious contract.
I'm going to have to interrupt Juliana at the moment while she sorts out her mic. And Juliana, I'm going to move on to the next person until you sort your mic out, and then we can come back to you afterwards. So the next person is Gargi Bhattacharya, where she is the chair of the branch at University of East London and the member of Black Members Standing Committee and UCU representative on the TUC Race Relations Committee. Gargi has been around doing a lot of union work for many, many years, and I'd like to again introduce Gargi to you. Gargi, you have 5 minutes to introduce your positioning around union work and then to answer 3 questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hello, my name's Gargi Bhattacharya. Work at the University of London, where we're facing a massive threat to jobs right now. My employer has launched a so-called consultation over summer to end next week, although they've extended it for 1 week into September, to lose up to 200 staff and with further job threats after that. So forgive me if I look sleep deprived, because I am sleep deprived. My whole summer has been taken up engaging in that battle with the employer and also in an attempt to make the threat to our organisation known in the community. One of the things that I and others at BMSC have been working on for really a number of years is to try and move away from thinking about racism in education as something that happens between individuals. We're encouraged all the time to think of racism as the ways in which someone is rude to me, someone doesn't like me, someone blocks me, as if it's me alone. And of course, for many of us, that's our experience at work, that we're often quite isolated. Many of us work in spaces where most, if not everyone else, is white in the spaces we're in, and that those slights are felt personally. But as a trade union, it's very important for us to think about how racism is always more than individual. It's always structural. You might experience it in your individual life, but the place that we can fight it as a union is when we identify the structures and challenge them. So instead of thinking someone was mean to me, think about how all the poor practice of employment is also a signal of institutional racism. And in particular in higher education, as people in the audience will know, precarious contracts clearly intersect with all forms of inequality. They're a way of demeaning everyone's contract, they're a way of crushing conditions across the sector. And it's no surprise that Black workers most of all suffer the outcomes of that. But also other ways in which injustice in the employment relation happen often get remade through racism. It's a way of making people quieten down because they feel like, oh, well, maybe that won't happen to me yet, because they're doing it to those Black folk first. Surprise, surprise, look, we were saying 20 years ago, this pass, soon you'll all have rubbish contracts. Look, it doesn't give me any pleasure to be proved right about that. We said, if you let this management bullying pass, soon everyone will have difficulty progressing, just as Black members have had difficulty progressing and been voted for so many years. Again, it gives me no pleasure to see that come, but it's something that we need to build around as a union. It's a way of speaking to white colleagues to make them understand that when we talk about workplace racism, there's also an investment for them in challenging it, because workplace racism is how the employer divides us and hides the true kind of malpractice they're engaged in. In terms of the questions, I wanted to say one quite precise thing, because I think people need to hear it, and one more general thing. The slightly bad-tempered precise thing I wanted to talk about was about the use of social media. There's been a couple of questions about what can the employer do about your social media. I think people need to sadly understand how much power the employer has about saying you are bad-mouthing the organization. So because we didn't 20 years ago, we didn't have social media, so it doesn't matter what I say in the pub or in the street about my employer, because my employer doesn't know. But if you're saying on your phone, there's a record, it's written, and it may come back to bite you. So I really think people need to understand, not that the employer can control social media, but if you're engaged in a power struggle with the employer about racism, and it is a power struggle, it's not a polite conversation, The reason they're racist is because it does something for them. It's useful for them. So when you challenge that, you're in a kind of battle about what racism is and what the employer can do. Be careful what you say on social media. If you say things, make sure that you don't open a case by more the employer to say that you have brought the organisation into disrepute, because they will. Employers scrape our social media and they employ lawyers to back up their people. So rather than saying, no, of course the employer doesn't have a right to police your social media, but the employer will use your social media if they're in a struggle with you, particularly around issues that are uncomfortable for them, such as their terrible racism. The more general thing I wanted to say was, what can we do to challenge structural racism and to kind of hold organisations accountable? And that, of course, as you can imagine, that's been the kind of question that Black Members Standing Committee has been engaged in since UCU emerged out of our two previous unions, NAPFI and AUT. So since 2006, I've on and off been in this space, and we're always returning to that. How do we hold organisations accountable when they want to police themselves? And I think this links to Black Lives Matter. That the Black Lives Matter movement has taught us is that powerful institutions are not racist by accident. They're racist in their core. It's not like there's nice education and then there's a bit of racism at the side. An education system which is designed to sift people into different hierarchies, to give them different value labels, to say some are out and some are in, that's racist at its core. That's core business. And that means that those organisations cannot police themselves. They cannot fix that racism. They need assistance from the community, from beyond their own boundaries. You can't hire some senior manager to be your champion for anti-racism. You can't say, oh, look, HR will have a new policy and we'll look at it. That's not enough. It's the police policing themselves, which we don't accept. So we should not accept it in our workplaces. So what we've been trying to think about is how we build bigger alliances to hold education to account, because education is a public asset. It's a social asset. It belongs to us, even though our employers don't like to admit that. So the work of the MSC going forward is to find ways to work with trade union colleagues and staff and students and the community to say, how do we together hold our employers to account? To say you're offering a service and you're an employer in our streets, in our neighbourhoods, with our children, with my livelihood. You don't hold the cards, we hold the cards. UEL, we're only just beginning this process because, you know, it's hard going when the employer uses summer holiday to say, I'm going to sack a whole load of you. You know, I threat, half of my committee are in the pool for redundancy. But we're starting to work with allies in the borough of Newham, where our 3 campuses are in Newham, to find ways to say, okay, well, the employer says we must do this because we're a charity who serves the community, but the employer's not speaking to the community. So we've got a series of events that are beginning now in which we ask the community directly, where we have different players of the community come and speak at our event to say, well, what should a university for this community be? And one thing of that, because Newham is a poor, diverse, highly Black and brown community, should be, how do you serve us? Don't sit in some other place and never visit our streets and say, you know what our education can be. We will decide, and then you will tell us whether you can do it. And that we're launching a new process, a new kind of document, a new organising model in the autumn that we hope a lot of you will use, which is a community accountability for race document, which is how about all of those issues we can all work in our neighbourhoods to say, the employer doesn't decide, we the community decide. And I hope going to see some of you work on that together with us. Thanks. I finished.
Thank you very much, Gargi. Really appreciate that. Look forward to you coming back to do the summing up. I'm going to move on to Umit. Umit Kamal Yildiz. I think that's how I pronounce it. I'm sure that Umit will tell me afterwards. Umit is a UCU activist, and he's also a Black Members Standing Committee member. And he's recently been made Joint Equalities Officer at Manchester University. Umit is very passionate about what he does, and I have the pleasure to introducing him, and so he can actually provide you with his positionality for UCU and what that stands for from himself. After that, he will, of course, go into his questions, where he has 3. He has 5 minutes for the first part and maximum 5 minutes for the second, and he will have a minute to show. We will give him a minute's heads up at the end of that. Umit, I introduce you. I send you the floor, give you the floor.
Thanks, Victoria. Sisters and brothers, comrades, thanks for listening us. And before I start talking about issues related to UCU, I'd like to send, our congratulations to students and parents who won great big victory against government's A-level results fiasco. I think that U-turn which governments made is a great big victory for all of us, not just for the students, but everybody who works in education and also in our, society, because it shows that protest works. If we work together, if we campaign together, we can win. And the racist Tory government is weak. We, as a trade union, if we work together, I think we can win and we can challenge institutional racism, not just in our own institution, but the whole government. In the next 5-10 minutes, what I want to try to do is answer 2 issues. I will highlight 2 issues. First one is how we can challenge structural racism, and second one is how we can organize in our branches. And then Gargi really explained well about what structural racism is and what our managements are doing. So what I'm going to say is we should not expect any movement against and or challenge the structural racism from our management, because our management is already implementing job cuts. They are normalizing casual works, and institutional discrimination is what they are doing. So the struggle, the demand for a change is going to come from our grassroots organizations. It is going to come from us. It will be a product of our work. It will be a collective work. And I believe this struggle is been going on for many years, and we are here and we are campaigning against racism. And if we have some rights right now, it is because we are standing on the shoulders of previous anti-racist trade unionists, Black activists, and Black trade unionists. I think we have to build on from their work. We should never forget their works that they've done before us. And also, I think we need to mention our 22-day strike in this year and last December. Those, as far as I can remember, being in the NATFE and a previous predecessor of UCU and a UCU, we have not fought specifically for equality rights until recently. Our four-fight struggle to the fighting for race equality, race pay, challenging the race pay gap, gender pay gap, and anti-casualization, against casualization. I think it is the starting point for us to challenge structural racism. And Gargi mentioned earlier that university is not just about who works at university, but it is more than us. It is about community. In order to challenge structural racism, we have to involve wider community, because what kind of university we want is the reflection of what kind of society we want. We don't want our universities to give us just tokenist letters and tokenist policies that we are anti-racist. We want anti-racist university. We want a university where there is no discrimination. And in order to achieve this, individual struggles are not enough. We need to campaign collectively, and the collective actions can be built on, such as important events like the Black Lives Matter, if we can combine other works like Black Lives Matter and the other anti-racist organizations working within the trade unions movement and other trade unions in our campuses, I believe we can win our fight. It is not easy. We don't have a magic wand to change things, but it is a constant struggle, and we can win this. What I will be doing now, just I was told I need to go on to questions, and I think I have some time to answer that. And the questions which I was going to answer is the first one, and how do we network with student unions and other grassroots groups? I mean, it should be part and parcel of every trade union movements, because if we want to challenge the whole university structure, we need to work with students' union. And our branch committees should make contact with its newly elected students' executive right now, before the starting of the academic term. We should plan new meetings, organize joint meetings with students and their concerns. For example, health and safety issues and its impact on Black workers and Black students. I think this is one way of organizing with the students. Also, we should remember that when we were on strike, students campaigned really well with us. Winning students means we can work together with them and challenge the university's discriminative policies. The other question is, how do branch build bridges with staff networks? I think staff networks is the good places for we can go and work with the people. We should encourage our members, union members, to go to the staff network groups and introduce our union and introduce our union's work, anti-racist work, and encourage our non-members or the other union members to come to our meetings. What we can do all together is we can organize targeted open meetings and include non-union members. We can organize special talks for whole university members, and we can do this jointly with staff members. I think these are the ways of we can organize. We should also organize drop-in sessions for our members, and if our members ask other people who can come to these drop-in sessions, and they can learn about our union, what kind of works we are doing. And the next question was how we can get involved our members. And I think in order to get involved our Black members, our branch has to be an active branch. Our branch has to show our members equality issues and Black members issues at the heart of our day-to-day work. If we don't organize this through our branch, we won't be able to reach our members. Our members has to recognize that we are doing the work. However, branch has to do work, but also I think Black members, our UCU Black members, we have to put ourselves for the positions in the branch. We have to lead our branch. If we don't lead our branch, we won't be able to influence our branch. This is really important. But my message to all our members here, when we go back to our branches, we have to encourage our Black members to take position in our branch. We have to show that we have to be linking with our Black and white comrades together and organizing our branch, both in school levels or the faculty levels and regional and university levels or college levels, wherever we are working. I think we have, I was told I have 1 minute to wrap up. In general, what I want to say in short, we should not rely on management to challenge structural racism or inequality issues. The work has to be our work. We have to demand. And in these strange times, I think we have to build on the victories such as Black Lives Matter movement organized, and we can use that, we can take this opportunity to demand more and challenge our management, and also get our members to involve on our foresight campaigns and demand pay equality, race equality, and gender equality in our branches. I'll shut up here.
Thank you so much, Umit. It's difficult to have short amounts of time when you're passionate about something, so I recognize that. I'm now going to introduce our next panel member, and I'm delighted to, as delighted with the rest of our colleagues, to introduce Sharon Clark. Now, Sharon Clark, she comes from prison education. So as you see, we've already had somebody from, we've had Maxine from further education, we've had Gargi from higher education, we've had Umit from higher education, and we've now got Sharon Clark from prison education. Now, her knowledge and experience is gained from being employed by the Youth Offending Service, working with ages from 12 to 21, previous working in the Young Offenders Institute, and having been employed by the prison education provider. Sharon's now works in an adult prison education, delivering therapeutic art, and is passionate about sharing the multifaceted benefits that pursuing art can offer. Tackling issues of race in this environment as an employee has contributed to Sharon's ability to understand others. Sharon, I'm going to hand over to you. You've got a few minutes to just position yourself and what you kind of stand for and why you're here on the platform. And then you've got 3 questions to answer. And then with those 3 questions, you've got a maximum of 5 minutes. And then from there, we will move on to the next person. But please look out on your chat for messages to tell you to finish. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. I'd like to start out with a statement representing the Black employees in prison education. In prison education, for far too long have Black employees been silenced. I feel here today I represent the past and present employees. It's about changing the dynamics, addressing a system of balance. Myself, I was silenced for a long time. It's great to be given this platform to speak our truth. We need to challenge a system by asking uncomfortable questions about structural and institutionalized racism. It's not about us and them, but working as a collective. Making the necessary changes within prison education, where talking about race is not classed as a bad word, causing fear in management. When the issue of racism is brought up, we do not want to be confronted with eye-rolling or condescending tones or comments. A safe space needs to be provided so we can air our issues. We will no longer be silenced. We will no longer be oppressed by the fear as a mechanism of control. We are now, as prison educators, as Black employees, unmuted. Right, I'll go on to the first question. It's how can we work together and make prison education as part of the gender and not education's poor relation? I think platforms like this is perfect. I think sometimes a lot of people don't realise that education does happen in behind the walls in the prison system, and there's a lot of employees that are there fighting the cause, but we're always unheard. And it's like when there's, I think as well, to like promote what we do, we have to look at the way agendas are presented. We have to look at the way sentences are formed when you're looking at higher education, further education. Why not put on the end of that prison education so we all have an equal footing? It's like, and then also providing networking situations where we can share ideas and share actual issues that are going on and we can relate to what's going on with each other. So I'm going to go on to the next one, which is, why does structural racism continue to thrive? Because it's allowed to. That's a simple answer. It's allowed to. structural racism, if I look at like where I'm working in the prison environment, which is steeped in institutional racism, and it's been going on for such a long time, it's part of the culture. It's as if they can use the excuse of it's been carrying on like this for a long time. We're in 2020. We're educated individuals. We know what's right and wrong. So there is no excuse for this to be continually happening. There also has to be a culture of, don't be afraid of somebody coming up and saying, do you know what, there's an issue with racism in this establishment. They need to actually address it in a formative way. And it's not just about filling out paperwork. It's about addressing the issue and speaking to the individual. And it's also, like I said in my first statement, you know, we've got to have a space where we can go to someone and say, do you know what? This person's made a racist comment and it needs to be addressed. So how do we go forward and deal with this? None of this brushing under the carpet. It's not good enough. And it's not good enough. It's as simple as that. None of this rolling your eyes and coming and saying, do you know what? It might be the way you present yourself. It might be the way you are coming across. So then I become the oppressor, but I am the victim as well. How can you justify that? And you've been doing it for a long time. It is time for institutions. It is time for organizations to actually move forward and say, do you know what? There has to be a change. It is not acceptable anymore. It is not. It's never been acceptable. But at this time, it is not acceptable. This unbiased consciousness that they're saying, come on now. Everyone is conscious. Everyone is people are educated. We're in 2020. Google's a wonderful format to educate yourselves. What does it take for it to become the conscious element? It takes for someone to be on the street and someone's knee on their neck. Is that conscious enough for you? It needs to change. So moving on to the next question is that would indirect discrimination relate to structural discrimination? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is how it's able to thrive, because the indirectness is a way of them getting away with the statements that they make. I will give you a situation. As a tutor, I did a project on Black history. I wanted to focus on the Windrush generation, and I focused on Black footballers of the first generation of the Windrush families. So we did lots of portraits inspired by the National Portrait Gallery. So we did all this. The work was phenomenal. However, there seemed to be an issue because there was too much blackness. How can that be justified? However, they're saying that we need to promote Black History Month, but that was too much blackness for them to actually deal with. So when they're coming to me, indirectly, may I add, coming and saying, oh, do you know what? How can we, if we need to represent? Actually, I am representing. And do you know what? They addressed the residents of the institution, and the residents said, actually, I didn't notice that. What I noticed was the fine detail and the fine artistic work that was happening. So now we need to have a look at, as a people, and I'm going to address the Black members as well who are working in these institutions. I know it's tough. I know it's difficult, because you've got to rise up and you've got to unmute yourself, because this has been going on for far too long. We have been silenced for far too long. They've used fear of classing us as troublemakers, saying that we've got chips on our shoulder, and then you're made to feel insignificant. And I'm sorry, while I'm standing now and as a representative, as a Black female working in prisons, I'm not accepting it anymore. I've been working for nearly 20 years and I was silenced for a long time. And do you know what? I'm going to hold the organizations accountable. I'm going to hold education providers accountable. You are saying constantly, we stand with you, show me. I'm tired of reports. I'm tired of people saying, oh, we've done this research. How have you done the research? Who has done the research? Have you involved us in the research? No, you haven't. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired. A lot of us are tired of this. We cannot have this continually happening. Involve us in the conversation. Involve us in the research. Stop providing research and telling me about myself. It is not good enough and I will not accept it anymore. It is not good enough. And I'm going to hold you accountable. And I'm going to say as well to the people vying for the VP role, I am going to be on your case. I'm going to be on your case. A lot of everyone's manifestos are saying we stand by our brothers and sisters, which is great. I've got no issue with that. What I've got an issue with, how are you following the papers that you are doing? How are you making actions on the statistics that you are saying that you have got? Because I've had enough. I'm tired of going into conferences and people saying to me, oh, well, black people, you know, and black males are this and black males are that. And they've formulated their research, which is flawed, which is fundamentally flawed. And I'm telling you, I'm going to question you at every step of the way. So do you know what? I know I've put my neck on the line by doing this. I know I have. But do you know what? I've come to a stage in my life and I've come to a stage in my career. And I hope the education providers are listening. I hope HMPPS are listening, because time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We're heating up. We are heating up. And I thank you so much for that. Do save your energy for the end, because we've got a last minute kind of wrap up after we've introduced my next colleague, who is, of course, Juliana. Juliana, I'm glad your system is back on track. As I said before, she's a member of Sheffield College. She's an active member in a regional network for Yorkshire and Humberside, and a member of the Black Standing Committee. She's also a member of the Women's Committee as well. Juliana, you've got slightly shorter time than the others. We do need to kind of get you moving. Over to you. So a little bit about you and then your questions.
Okay, so well, you've already introduced me, so I don't think I need to go any further than that. I work for the Sheffield College, and I'm in FE and so on. So the issue is that we have had all the reports, we've had everything that needs to be written. So now black workers are sick to the back teeth about, you know, all these reports, all these reviews and so on, and they want action now. And whilst we talk about UCU, FE is often looked on as being the poor relation of HE within UCU. And therefore, if you think that's the case, then you must recognize that black workers are the poorest relation within UCU, and something needs to be done about their needs and so on. So the UCU's own report showed that black workers in FE are most likely to face barrier in promotion. That they don't get informed about the processes of promotion in FE. They're not supported in seeking promotion. They're not given support or job security in their jobs and so on. They're more likely to be employed in the areas least secure and so on. The black workers within FE are the harshest treated, especially black women, in terms of discipline and so on. They are also overrepresented in the 0-hour contracts provisions and so forth, and excluded, and this is quite important, excluded from decision-making process. There's also a high number of black workers who say that they suffer a lot of cultural insensitivity within HE and within FE. So the question is then, how do we advance FE, the struggle in FE? So first of all, we need to ensure that the policies that the employers are working with are being utilized fairly in the interests of the black workers. What tends to happen, a lot of black workers have said, is that when it comes to discipline and when it comes to issues of suspension, the managers often throw away the rule books and then don't focus on the procedures to support black workers. So black workers need the support of UCU in fighting their situation, in fighting their condition. Because one of the things that's come out recently is that a lot of these institutions don't even have the basic knowledge of definition of racism. None of them ever apply the Macpherson report as a part of the way to define institutional racism, which includes things like attitudes and behavior, the processes within institution, and how these things work against the black workers. So a lot of black workers, when you have issues, please examine the processes that's being utilized within your institution. Okay, so there are not only managers that lack this knowledge, there's also union reps who lack this knowledge, and they're quite happy to tell you that they don't know anything about race or racism. Such ignorance should not be tolerated within our union. We need to make sure that people who are representing the union know what they're talking about, the black workers and so on. Okay, so Black workers then need to be given space, as my colleague has mentioned before, to discuss issues of concern to them, and obviously link this to the policies within the colleges as well. The FE colleges and managers need to show steps that they're taking in reducing Eurocentric workforce, because a lot of the time we're having, if you like, a whitewashing of the workplace and so on. And also Black workers need mentoring in looking at what employment activities are available within that. And of course, issues of intersectionality needs to come into this. Okay, so in terms of the questions, and I was asked the question about, the question was about if what will be the strategy in FE for increasing the number of Blacks, to increase Black, especially females, to the part of management. Well, first of all, there has to be a commitment from management to begin with, and they have to recognize that there is a deficit. Recent report has shown that the FE is hemorrhaging Black workers. So that needs to be stemmed, that needs to be dealt with. There has to be a commitment by the employer that they will support the Black female person or male person who wants to apply for the position. And they need to be informed about these vacancies in advance so that they can begin to look at what skills that they have in order to apply for that. There have to be a support mechanism of a mentor system that would help the person to apply for these positions and matching their skills to the position. And there has to be a cultural change, a major cultural change. You know, the old boy network needs to be looked at and to ensure that the issues of concern to the Black person or Black woman is taken into consideration, that there is a diversity of cultural acceptance within the management position. And also, we don't want token appointment. So non-tokenistic appointment is important. And there needs to be a training for the person who wants to do that particular job. Then the other thing I was asked about was about, is there structural racism at FE sector as on the same level as in HE? Yes, absolutely. There is, without any doubt. And as I mentioned before, Black workers are leaving in large numbers in FE because they face institutional racism. They're not promoted, as is pointed out before. UCA report has shown this. As in HE, there is barriers to recruitment. There are barriers to promotion prospects. There are barriers to, they face racist bullying within the organization and harassment. They're not included in the employment decision making, and they suffer a lot of day-to-day racism. And there's a lot of Muslim women who have been made mockery of because they wear scarf. So there's a day-to-day racism going on. So yes, there is a lot of racism similar to what our colleagues face in HE. So I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate that. I just want to first of all say thank you to my colleagues, Maxine, Gargi, Umit, Sharon, and Juliana. I really appreciate what you've done and what you've said. I recognize the short of time we've had. So key things, just summing up very quickly. 1, safe space. To be Black members and to acknowledge the fact that as Black members, we need a safe space to come forward. We don't need you to hold the mic. We don't need you to speak for us. We don't need you to be white saviors. What we want you to do is acknowledge our experience and let us speak for ourselves. We also need to acknowledge that understanding that when it comes to job cuts, when it comes to casualization, when it comes to part-time workers, the disproportionate numbers of Black staff are the ones which are in those positions. And for speaking out, it means that they're finding it difficult because it's either speaking out or losing their jobs. We want our employers to look at that, consider that, and recognize that this isn't about us using the, in quotes, a race card. It's about the lived experience. The other point as well, which I think you've all alluded to, is suffering in silence. Many of our Black members suffer in silence, and they suffer with disproportionate health issues because of the discrimination they face, whether it's discrimination because they're Black and have a disability, Black and on LGBT, Black and being a woman, or Black and religious, or Black and any of the other categories. They will suffer. And it's about what do we do to support and work with our colleagues. As Sharon said, unmute yourself. We're here as the Black Member Standing Committee to reach out and support and work with you. Chris, I want to say thank you very much. Rebecca, I want to say thank you very much. Swati, I want to say thank you very much. We now need to end. It's 7 o'clock. I really appreciate it. I hope this conversation will continue. As Chris has mentioned, there's some other things as well which is going on. If you want to get involved, becoming more active in the Black initiatives, campaigns, etc., please email cnicholas@ucu.org.uk for further information. If you've got any ideas, please email Chris. We need fresh eyes, fresh information, fresh ideas. We're here for you. We're here to make a difference. Let BMSC stand for you. Let them make a difference. It's very, very important. There's another webinar coming up in September. Look out for that. There's another one in October. Thank you again. Enjoy the evening and keep the conversation live and going, especially with Black Lives Matter. There was another shooting just yesterday in America. Lots of things happening in the UK as well. Keep things moving. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, panel.